The sun over Cedar Ridge was a cruel white eye in the sky, but Clara Bennett wasn't looking up. She was already living in hell. In the next room, her father's breath rattled like dry corn husks, each one a countdown to the end of her life. Because Harlan Blackwood was coming. She was 19 years old and she was about to be sold. Not for coin, but for something far more valuable in the desert. Time. A few more weeks of life for her father, paid for by a lifetime of misery for her. He's offered to pay the doctor from Tucson, her father had rasped, the words costing him more than he had left. And to settle our debts. The question died on her lips. In exchange for what? She knew. She'd known the moment Blackwood's shadow first fell across their doorway. You're to be married, her father had whispered, turning his face to the adobe wall. Come Sunday. Harlan Blackwood, a man carved from the rock and heat of the territory. He had cold gray eyes that saw everything as something to be owned. Land, cattle, and now her. She could see his men from her window, their shapes shimmering in the heat. They weren't guarding the house. They were guarding an investment. I won't do it, she had said, her voice a reedy whisper that tried to sound like a roar. Mama wouldn't have wanted this. Your mama's dead, her father coughed, a sound that tore through the small room. And I'll be joining her soon. You think I want this, but you'll starve without protection. Protection? The word was a lie. Clara had seen the way the Mexican girls who worked in Blackwood's house flinched when he walked by. She'd heard the town whispers about his first wife, the one who died from a riding accident just 2 years into their marriage. No, this wasn't protection. It was a cage. And that night she decided she'd rather face the rattlesnakes in the heat than the cold touch of Harlan Blackwood. The moon was a sharp hook in the black sky as she moved through the house. The borrowed wedding dress on the wall looked like a hanging ghost. She took nothing from that life. She packed what little she could carry, a canteen of water, a pouch of dried jerky, and her mother's small silver locket. Then from a loose floorboard her father had long forgotten, she pulled his old Colt revolver. It was heavy, solid, a cold promise in her trembling hands. She saddled their old mare Buttercup in the dark. A tear dripped onto the worn leather as she whispered an apology for leaving her father to die alone. Then she was gone, a phantom slipping into the vast, unforgiving desert. She rode for hours, the only sounds the soft fall of hooves and the frantic beating of her own heart. The towering saguaros pointed to the stars like accusing fingers. She had no map, no destination, just the desperate need to put Cedar Ridge behind her. But the desert has a long memory, and so does a man like Harlan Blackwood. The hoofbeats came from behind, a low rumble at first, then a growing thunder that shook the very ground. They were coming, faster than she'd ever imagined. Panic was a physical thing, a hand squeezing her heart. She urged Buttercup into a gallop, but the old mare was no match for their fresh horses. They cornered her at Devil's Wash, a deep scar in the earth carved by ancient floods. Rough hands yanked her from the saddle. She fought like a cornered wildcat, nails raking across a bearded cheek, teeth sinking into a forearm. A backhanded slap sent her sprawling to the rocky ground, stars exploding behind her eyes. Thought you could run from Mr. Blackwood, did you? The voice belonged to Jake Morrison, Blackwood's foreman. He grabbed her by the hair, hauling her to her feet. He don't take kindly to his property trying to escape. I'm not his property, she spat, her mouth filling with the taste of blood and grit. Morrison's laugh was a dry, ugly sound. You will be, come morning, and he'll teach you some proper respect for your husband. They were dragging her back to their horses when it happened. A figure materialized from the shadows of the rocks, tall, lean, moving with the fluid grace of a mountain lion. In the moonlight, Clara saw long, black hair, copper skin, and eyes that burned with an intensity that stole her breath. An Apache warrior. He moved like a whisper of death. His knife found Morrison's throat before the man could even draw his gun. There was no sound, just a surprised gurgle as the big man fell. The other two men scrambled for their weapons. It was the last mistake they ever made. Arrows whispered from the darkness, finding their marks with deadly precision. In moments, it was over. 3 bodies lay still on the blood-soaked earth. Clara scrambled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs as the warrior approached. He was younger than she'd first thought, with sharp cheekbones and scars that told stories of battles survived. A Winchester rifle was slung across his back. He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes taking in her torn dress, her bruised face, the desperation etched into her very soul. When he spoke, his English was accented but clear. "You run from a forced marriage." It wasn't a question. Clara could only nod, her voice lost somewhere in her terror and awe. The warrior's gaze shifted to the dead men, then back to her. Something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or maybe recognition. "I am called Stormcrow in your tongue," he said. "These men would have taken you back to a life worse than death." "Thank you," Clara whispered, the words feeling small and useless for the life he had just given her back. Stormcrow moved to the bodies, retrieving his arrows with practiced efficiency. He checked their pockets, his movements quick and sure. Then he paused, pulling a folded piece of paper from Morrison's inner vest. He glanced at it, his face unreadable in the moonlight. He tucked the paper away and turned back to her, and his next words sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the desert cold. "I have saved you from him," he said, his voice carrying the weight of ancient promises. "But in the end, you will be my wife." Before Clara could process the shock, he held out his hand. In the distance, she could hear them. More riders. Blackwood wouldn't have sent just 3 men. She looked at the bloody ground. She looked at the dangerous stranger who had killed for her without a moment's hesitation. And for the second time that night, she made a choice that would change her life forever. She took his hand. Stormcrow's hand was calloused and strong, pulling her to her feet with a surprising gentleness. The approaching hoofbeats grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls like war drums. He didn't speak. He whistled, a low, sharp sound, and a painted Mustang emerged from the shadows. Its coat was a patchwork of black and white, a ghost horse for a ghost warrior. "Your horse is too slow," he said, already lifting her onto his mount. She found herself seated in front of him, his arm a band of steel around her waist as he guided the Mustang with his knees alone. He slapped Buttercup's rump, sending the old mare galloping back towards the town she had just fled. "She will find her way home," was all he said. They rode like the wind, following paths only he could see. They slipped through narrow passages between towering rocks where the stars were a silver river overhead. His presence behind her was a strange mixture of terror and comfort. She could feel the raw power in him, the absolute certainty of his every move. As dawn bled across the eastern sky, they finally slowed. Clara's entire body ached. Her torn dress was useless against the morning chill. They had climbed high into the Dragoon Mountains, where twisted juniper trees clung to the rocks and eagles soared on the thermals. He dismounted, then helped her down. Her legs nearly buckled, but she forced herself to stand, to meet his intense gaze. In the growing light, she could see him more clearly, the sun-weathered lines around his eyes, a thin scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his jaw, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. "Why?" she asked, the single word encompassing everything. "Why save me? Why kill for me? And why claim me?" He was silent for a long moment, scanning the horizon with the constant vigilance of a man who lived his life on the edge of a knife. "Blackwood's men killed my sister," he said finally, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "2 winters passed. She was gathering herbs by the river. They used her and left her body for the coyotes." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. The brutal stories whispered in town suddenly had a face, a family, a brother who sought a justice the white man's law would never give him. "I'm sorry," she whispered, his jaw tightened. "Sorry changes nothing. But when I saw you fighting them, I saw the same fire in your eyes that was in little Dove's before they put it out." He looked at her then, truly looked at her. No woman should be forced, not by them, not by anyone. "Including you?" Clara challenged, a spark of her own fire returning. "You said I would be your wife." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a fleeting thing that did not reach his eyes. "I said, in the end. The end is not now. First, you must learn to survive." He led her to a concealed spring, bubbling from the rocks. She drank deeply, the cold water a blessing on her parched throat. He laid out supplies from a hidden cache: dried venison, corn cakes, a woven blanket. As she ate, he began her first lesson. He showed her how to read the land, to find the signs of water, to move without making a sound. Your people walk like you own the earth, he said, his voice tinged with contempt, but the earth owns all of us. They rested during the brutal heat of the day. Huddled in the shade of a rock outcropping, Clara was acutely aware of him, just feet away. A dangerous, violent man who had shown her more kindness than anyone in her own town. "Tell me about your sister," she said softly. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Little Dove loved to sing," he said, his voice now low and rough with memory. "She was to be married. Our mother was preparing the wedding gifts." His pain was a tangible thing, a chasm of grief that ached between them. "My mother died 4 years ago," Clara offered into the silence. "She used to sing too." They sat that way for a long time, two strangers from warring worlds, bound by a shared silent language of loss. As the shadows grew long, they started moving again. He taught her how to find prickly pear fruit, how to make a fire with a bow drill. Her hands, soft and useless, were soon covered in blisters and scratches. "Patience," he said, his hand steadying hers. "Fire comes to those who persist." On the second night, they camped in a canyon whose walls were covered in ancient paintings. Spirals and animals and human figures danced in the flickering firelight. "My people have been here since before memory," Stormcrow said, his voice full of a history she could barely comprehend. "Before your people came with their paper and their guns to claim what cannot be owned." "My father only wanted peace," she said quietly. "He fought in the war. He saw too much killing." Stormcrow snorted. "There is no peace when men bring their wars with them." He was right. The violence had followed her people west, a relentless shadow they cast over everything they touched. On the third day, her foot slipped on loose shale. She cried out as a sharp pain shot through her ankle. He was there in an instant, his hand surprisingly gentle as he examined the injury. "Not broken," he determined, "but you cannot walk on it." He tore strips from his own shirt to bind her ankle, then lifted her onto his back without a word. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck, her face pressed against the warmth of his skin. The intimacy of it made her blush, but there was nothing but practical care in his touch. That night she watched him by the fire. He was handsome, but not in the way of the boys in town. He was all sharp angles and fluid grace, an intensity that was both terrifying and thrilling. "What is your true name?" she asked. "Stormcrow is your English name. What do your people call you?" He looked at her, his eyes dark pools in the firelight. "To know a true name is to hold a piece of a man's spirit." "Then I won't ask again," she said, understanding the boundary. But later, as she drifted to sleep, she heard him whisper a name in his own tongue, syllables that flowed like water over stones. She didn't know what it meant, but she held the sound close, a secret gift. The fourth morning brought the hunt to their doorstep. Stormcrow woke her before dawn, his hand clamped over her mouth, his body tense as a drawn bow. She heard them then, horses, dogs barking, the voices of men. "Blackwood has hired trackers," he breathed in her ear. "Apache scouts, men who sell their skills to the highest bidder." Clara's blood ran cold. If other Apache were hunting them, they had no chance. Stormcrow's face hardened into a mask of deadly resolve. "They have chosen their path," he said. "Now I must choose mine." He handed her his rifle, quickly showing her how to load and aim. "If I fall, you run. Follow the stream south. It leads to Mexico. Find the mission at San Miguel. The sisters will help you." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Clara said, surprised by the ferocity in her own voice. That ghost of a smile returned. "You have a warrior's heart, Clara Bennett. Perhaps that is why the spirits brought you to me." But as he turned to face the coming danger, she saw him pull the folded paper from his vest, the one he'd taken from Morrison's body. He stared at it for a long, hard moment, and a look of deep conflict crossed his face. He wasn't just preparing for a fight, he was weighing a choice. And Clara realized with a jolt that his reasons for saving her, for everything he'd done, might be far more complicated than simple revenge for his sister. That piece of paper held a secret, a secret he was willing to die to protect. The news of Clara's abduction spread through Cedar Ridge like a wildfire. In the Copper Dollar Saloon, the story grew more gruesome with every telling. 3 of Blackwood's best men, dead, butchered by savages. "That poor girl," Mrs. Fletcher clucked, her eyes gleaming with morbid excitement. "To think what those heathens are doing to her. Death would be a mercy." The men just talked about the money. "Blackwood's offering $1,000 now," said the blacksmith, "for her return. Says he'll still marry her, despite her circumstances." Everyone knew what that meant. A white woman taken by Indians was ruined. Tainted goods. But Harlan Blackwood didn't see it that way. In his sprawling ranch house, he paced his study like a caged wolf. "She's mine," he snarled at his new foreman, Pete Daniels. "Bought and paid for. No Apache bastard is going to steal what belongs to me." "The scouts say they're deep in Apache territory, Mr. Blackwood," Daniels said carefully. "That's dangerous ground." "Then hire more guns," Blackwood roared, sweeping a crystal decanter off his desk. It shattered against the stone fireplace. "Hire every killer from here to Tombstone. I want her back. And the Apache who took her. I want him killed, slowly, and I want her to watch." His obsession had nothing to do with love. It was about possession, about a piece of property that had dared to defy him. Miles away in a sheltered valley, Clara and Stormcrow had evaded the trackers, for now. Her ankle was healing, and with each passing day she was learning more. But they both knew their time was running out. "We cannot keep running," Stormcrow said. "Soon I must take you to my people." "They'll hate me," Clara said, her stomach tightening, "for my white skin." "Some will," he admitted, "but my grandmother is a wise woman. She will see the spirit, not the face." That night, Stormcrow finally spoke of the paper he had taken from Morrison. He unfolded it carefully by the firelight. It wasn't a letter. It was a legal document. A deed. "This land," he said, tracing a line on the paper with his finger, "where my people have lived for 1,000 years. It has a spring, the only year-round water for 50 miles. Your father's name is on this paper. He sold the rights to this spring to Harlan Blackwood." Clara stared, uncomprehending. "My father? He owns nothing. We're poor." "The paper says otherwise. It says the land was granted to his family for service in the war. He didn't know its value, but Blackwood did." Stormcrow's eyes burned with a cold fire. "This wasn't just about a debt from the general store. Blackwood needed your father dead, and he needed you as his wife. With you as his bride and your father gone, his claim to the water would be unbreakable." The ugly truth settled in Clara's stomach like a stone. Her father's illness, the mounting debts, Blackwood's sudden, generous offer. It had all been a lie, a carefully constructed trap. Blackwood wasn't trying to save her father. He was waiting for him to die so he could steal their water. And her marriage was just the final legal seal on the theft. "My sister," Stormcrow's voice was low. "She wasn't just gathering herbs. She had discovered what Blackwood was doing. She was trying to find your father to warn him. Blackwood's men found her first. The revenge he sought wasn't just for his sister's death. It was for the future of his entire people. And now Clara was at the very center of it. She wasn't just a runaway bride. She was the one living person who could challenge Blackwood's claim." The next morning, their world got smaller. 3 Apache warriors emerged from the rocks, their faces grim. They spoke rapidly in their own tongue, their gestures sharp and angry. Clara didn't need to understand the words. She could feel the hostility directed at her. One warrior, his face painted with red ochre, spat on the ground near her feet. Stormcrow stepped between them, his hand on his knife. The argument grew heated. Finally, the eldest of the 3, a man with silver in his hair, raised a hand for silence. He studied Clara with eyes that seemed to strip away her skin and look straight into her soul. After a long, tense exchange, the warriors melted back into the landscape. "What did they say?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "That is my uncle, Spotted Eagle," Stormcrow said, his voice tight. "He says I have brought a ghost into our lands, a white woman who brings nothing but death. He says Blackwood's men will follow you and burn our camps to the ground." Then let me go, Clara pleaded. I won't have innocent blood on my hands. Stormcrow grabbed her arm. It's too late for that. You are part of this now. My uncle has decreed that you will be brought before the council. They will decide if you live or die. He didn't let go of her arm. And if they decide you should die, he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, they will have to go through me. The journey to the Apache camp was a silent, tense affair. The landscape grew harsher, more beautiful, and more alien. Red rock spires clawed at a sky so blue it hurt to look at. This was their land. The land Blackwood was trying to steal. Before they entered the camp, Stormcrow took her to a sacred spring. You must wash away the world you came from, he said. Clara washed in the cold, clear water, her torn dress a pathetic reminder of the girl she used to be. When she emerged, he had laid out clothing for her. A simple dress of soft doe skin, leggings, and moccasins. Putting them on felt like shedding a skin. It felt like a beginning and an end. When he saw her, his eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something that wasn't about survival or revenge. It was quickly hidden, but Clara saw it. The camp was nestled in a hidden canyon, the wickiups blending so perfectly with the landscape that they were almost invisible. As they walked in, a silence fell. Women stopped their work to stare. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts. The eyes that followed her were filled with suspicion and hatred. An old woman emerged from the largest dwelling. Her face was a beautiful map of wrinkles, her gray hair bound in the traditional way. She carried herself with an authority that was absolute. This was Singing River, Stormcrow's grandmother. She circled Clara slowly, her gaze sharp and penetrating. She spoke, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves, and Stormcrow translated. She says you have the eyes of a survivor, but sorrow follows you like a shadow. The old woman reached out a gnarled hand and touched the silver locket at Clara's neck. She asks what you are willing to sacrifice to save the people whose land you now wear on your feet. Clara looked from the wise old woman to Stormcrow, his face a mask of stone. She looked at the hostile faces surrounding her. She thought of the deed in Stormcrow's pouch, the lie that had almost cost her everything, and the truth that could get them all killed. She had run from one cage, only to find herself in another. And this time, there was nowhere left to run. The Apache camp was a hornet's nest, and Clara was the stone that had been thrown into it. The women whispered as she passed, their words sharp as cactus spines. The warriors watched her with open contempt. A young man named Black Wolf seemed to take her presence as a personal insult, his scarred face twisting with hatred every time he looked at her. Singing River gave her a small wickiup to herself, and the lessons began. The old woman spoke no English, teaching through gesture and repetition. Clara learned to grind mesquite pods into flour, her hands blistering and bleeding. She scraped hides until her arms ached, learned the names of plants for medicine and food. Her clumsy attempts were a source of constant amusement for the other women. But she persisted. Every dawn she rose with a fierce determination. She would not break. She would not give them the satisfaction. Stormcrow kept his distance, bound by his people's customs, but she would feel his eyes on her. Sometimes in the evenings, he would appear at the edge of her firelight. You are learning, he would say, and the simple words were enough to fuel her for another day. The hostility, however, was not just about her being white. She learned from Blue Heron, one of the few women who showed her kindness, that Black Wolf's family had been killed in a cavalry raid years ago. A raid that had been provoked by a young, reckless warrior who had stolen horses from a nearby ranch. That warrior had been Stormcrow. Black Wolf didn't just hate Clara because she was white. He hated her because she was another of Stormcrow's mistakes, another reckless act that he believed would bring death down upon them all. He brings bad medicine, Black Wolf would say loudly in the council circle. First his pride cost me my family, now he brings the white man's ghost to our very homes. The tension was a razor's edge. And then, the scouts returned. Their faces were grim. Soldiers, Blue Heron whispered to Clara, her own face pale. Many of them. They make camp at Willow Springs, half a day's ride from here. The camp erupted. That night, the Council of Elders argued. their angry voices echoing off the canyon walls. Stormcrow found her later, his face etched with worry. "Many say you must be given to them," he said, his voice heavy, "a sacrifice to save the rest." "They're right," Clara said, her own voice hollow. "This is my fault. Let me go. I'll lead them away." "No," his voice was iron. "They would take you, and then they would come for the water anyway. They would kill us all to cover their tracks." He took a deep breath. "There is another way. Tomorrow Singing River will speak for you, but you must do more than just listen. You must show them your heart." The next morning, Singing River dressed Clara in a ceremonial dress of the purest white doeskin, adorned with intricate beadwork. She was led to a natural amphitheater of red rock, where the council and the entire tribe had gathered. Singing River spoke first, her voice ringing with power. She spoke of Clara's spirit, of her willingness to learn. She held up Clara's blistered, scarred hands as proof of her efforts. Then Black Wolf rose. His words were poison. He spoke of massacres, of broken treaties, of the endless tide of white violence. He pointed a trembling finger at Clara. "Her skin is the color of death," he cried. "She is the disease, and she is the grave that waits for us." The crowd murmured, their fear and hatred stoked by his words. Finally the chief, a stoic man named Standing Bear, rose. He looked at Clara, his eyes filled with a deep, ancient sadness. "Words are wind," he said in accented English. "Actions are stone. What stone will you show us to prove your heart is true?" Clara's mind raced. What could she possibly offer them? She had nothing. Then her hand went to her mother's locket, the last piece of her old life. With trembling fingers, she unclasped it and walked forward. She knelt before Standing Bear and placed the locket in his weathered hands. "This was my mother's," she said, her voice carrying across the silent amphitheater. "It is all I have left of my family, of my world. I give it to you, not as payment, but as a promise." She looked up, meeting the eyes of every person there. "My old life is dead. If you will have me, I will be a daughter of the Apache. I will defend your children as my own. I will share your hunger, mourn your dead, and I will fight for this land, for the water that is yours by right." A stunned silence fell. Standing Bear opened the locket, looking at the tiny, faded photograph inside. When he looked up, his expression had softened. He spoke in Apache, his words slow and measured. Stormcrow translated, his voice thick with relief. He says, "You may stay. You must prove yourself through the changing of the seasons. If you are still here when the snows fall, then we will speak of belonging." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a chance. As the council dispersed, Black Wolf shouldered past her. "You have fooled the old man," he hissed, "but not me. When the soldiers come, we will see where your white heart truly lies." Stormcrow guided her away. "You did well," he said softly. "Are you proud?" she asked, searching his face. A flicker of warmth entered his dark eyes. "I am pleased," he said carefully. "But Black Wolf is right about one thing. The soldiers will come, and they will not come to talk." That night, as Clara lay in her wickiup, she clutched a new secret. Before the council, Blue Heron had approached her. "Black Wolf's wife," she'd whispered. "She did not die in the raid. She was taken to a place called Fort Grant. He believes she is still alive. He blames Stormcrow for not getting her back." The story was more tangled than she could have imagined. Black Wolf's hatred wasn't just about the past. It was about a future he thought Stormcrow had stolen from him. And as the cold desert wind whispered through the canyon, Clara knew that the soldiers were not the only storm gathering on the horizon. There was a storm brewing right here, in the heart of the camp, and she was standing directly in its path. The attack came not with the thunder of an army, but with the stealth of a snake. A dozen of Blackwood's hired guns, led by the turncoat Apache scout Kale, Stormcrow's own cousin, slipped into the canyon under the cover of a new moon. They didn't come to kill. Not yet. They came to send a message. They set fire to the winter stores, the precious caches of dried meat and corn that were meant to see the tribe through the harsh months ahead. They hamstrung a dozen of the best war ponies, and they stole something from Singing River's wickiup, a sacred medicine bundle that had been with the people for generations. The raid was over in minutes, the attackers melting back into the darkness, leaving chaos and despair in their wake. The loss of the food was a disaster. The loss of the medicine bundle was a spiritual death blow. "This is her fault," Black Wolf roared, standing over the smoldering ruins of their winter supply, pointing a shaking finger at Clara. "They came for her. She is a curse." The tribe was divided. Fear and superstition warred with reason. Stormcrow defended her fiercely, but the people's faith was shaken. The medicine bundle was gone. The spirits had abandoned them. It was Singing River who silenced the arguments. "The spirits have not left us," she said, her voice cutting through the hysteria. "They are testing us. They are testing her." She looked directly at Clara. "A warrior is forged in fire. We will see now if your spirit is strong enough to withstand the flames." The days that followed were grim. Rations were cut. The warriors grew restless. The shadow of Blackwood in the army loomed over them. And then the true storm broke. This time, it was an army. 30 men, a mix of hired guns and uniformed soldiers, rode into the canyon at dawn. At their head were 2 men. Harlan Blackwood, his face a mask of smug triumph. And beside him, a man Clara recognized with a sickening jolt of dread. Colonel James Morrison, the infamous Butcher of Sand Creek, a man whose name was synonymous with the massacre of Native women and children. The battle was brutal and one-sided. The Apache were outnumbered and outgunned. They fought with the desperate courage of a people defending their home. But for every soldier they took down, another 2 stepped forward. An elder fell, trying to shield his grandson. Blue Heron was shot as she ran for cover, her young daughter screaming beside her. Stormcrow fought like a demon, his rifle and knife a blur of deadly motion. "The caves!" he yelled to Clara. "Get the children to the caves!" Clara was frozen, watching the nightmare unfold. Then she saw the little girl, Blue Heron's daughter, standing over her mother's body, wailing. A soldier was leveling his rifle at the child. Without thinking, Clara ran. She threw herself in front of the girl, scooping her into her arms, expecting the impact of the bullet at any second. It never came. Black Wolf, who had shown her nothing but hatred, had launched himself at the soldier. The rifle fired, the bullet catching Black Wolf in the chest. He crumpled to the ground. His eyes met Clara's. In them she saw not hatred, but a dawning understanding. "My wife," he gasped, blood bubbling on his lips. "Fort Grant. Tell him." Then he was gone. Clara ran. The child clutched to her chest, Black Wolf's last words echoing in her ears. She herded the children into the dark, narrow caves in the canyon wall, but there was no safety there. Colonel Morrison's men, guided by Kyle, knew the hiding places. They began lighting fires at the cave mouths, filling the passages with thick, choking smoke. They were being smoked out like rats. It was then that Clara made her choice. Leaving the child with another woman, she walked out of the cave, alone, her hands raised in surrender. The fighting sputtered to a halt as all eyes turned to her. "Clara, my dear," Blackwood said, dismounting his horse, "you've led us on quite a chase." "Let them go," Clara said, her voice ringing with a strength she didn't know she possessed. "You came for me. You have me. Let the others go in peace." Colonel Morrison laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Apache don't get peace, girl. They get what they deserve." "Then you'll have to kill me, too," Clara said, taking a step forward, positioning herself between the soldiers and the mouths of the caves. "Because I will not leave while you slaughter these people." "You've been ruined by them," Blackwood sneered. "But no matter. I'll beat the wildness out of you once we're married." "I'll die first." "That can be arranged," Morrison drawled. But Blackwood held up a hand. "No, she's mine." As his men moved to grab her, the remaining Apache warriors led by Stormcrow charged from the rocks in a final, desperate assault. The battle exploded again. In the chaos, Clara was seized, dragged towards Blackwood's horse. Through the swirling dust and smoke, she saw Singing River emerge from her wickiup. The old woman was not running. She was walking calmly into the heart of the battle, holding the stolen medicine bundle. Kale, Stormcrow's cousin, must have had a flicker of conscience. He must have returned it. Singing River raised the sacred bundle high and began to chant, her ancient voice cutting through the noise of the battle. Even Morrison's men hesitated. A palpable wave of power, of old magic, seemed to ripple through the canyon. "It's just superstitious nonsense!" Morrison roared, raising his rifle. He fired. Singing River crumpled to the ground. A collective gasp of horror rose from the Apache. Stormcrow let out a cry of pure animal anguish and fought with a fury that was terrifying to behold. Clara used the moment of distraction to wrench free. She snatched a pistol from a fallen soldier's holster. "Stop!" she screamed, firing the pistol into the air. For a heartbeat, the battlefield fell silent. All eyes were on her, the white woman in the Apache dress, holding a smoking pistol. "Colonel Morrison," she said, her voice deadly calm, "you have just murdered a defenseless old woman. I was not a captive. I am here by choice. There is no court in this territory that will not see this for what it is. A massacre. No court cares what happens to Indians," Morrison sneered, "or to the white women who lie with them." "Then you leave me no choice," Clara said, and she turned the pistol, pressing the cold muzzle to her own temple. "Let them go, or I swear to God, my death will be on your hands, Harlan, and I will haunt you for the rest of your miserable life." Blackwood's face went white. "Clara, don't be a fool." "Order your men to withdraw," she commanded, her voice shaking but firm. "Now!" The standoff was a taut wire, ready to snap. Stormcrow watched, his face a mask of agony, but he understood. He knew this was their only chance. "You're bluffing," Blackwood whispered. Clara cocked the hammer. The click was the loudest sound in the canyon. "I have seen what men like you do. Death does not frighten me anymore." It was Blackwood who broke. He could not possess her if she was dead. "Lower your weapons," he ordered his men through gritted teeth. Reluctantly, the soldiers and hired guns began to back away. But Colonel Morrison had one last threat to deliver. As he mounted his horse, he looked at the surviving Apache. "This isn't over. We know where you are. We will be back, with the full United States cavalry, and we will wipe you from the face of this earth." As the attackers retreated, Clara's strength gave out. The pistol fell from her nerveless fingers. Stormcrow was there to catch her, holding her tight against his chest. "You beautiful, brave fool," he whispered into her hair. Around them, the survivors began to keen for their dead. Black Wolf, Singing River, so many others. The smoke from the burning wickiups mingled with the cries of grief. She had tried to be a bridge. Instead, she had brought a firestorm. Standing Bear, his arm bleeding from a deep gash, gathered the handful of survivors. "We must flee," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "To Mexico. But first, the council must decide what to do with the white woman." Clara straightened, ready to accept their judgment. But it was Stormcrow who spoke, his voice ringing with conviction. "She stood between their bullets and our children. She offered her life for ours. Black Wolf saw her true heart in the end. If we send her away now, we dishonor the sacrifice of all who died today." One by one, the others spoke. A warrior whose life she had saved. The woman who now held Blue Heron's orphaned daughter. They had seen her courage. They had seen her heart. Standing Bear made his pronouncement. "Clara Bennett died today with our fallen. In her place stands a new daughter of the people. We will call her White Dove, for she was willing to sacrifice herself for peace." And in that moment, something shifted inside her. She was no longer Clara Bennett. She was White Dove. But even as they prepared for their desperate flight, she knew this was not the end. Morrison would be back. Blackwood would never give up. And she had a promise to keep, a message to deliver. Stormcrow took her hand. "My vows stand," he said quietly. "To be my wife is to be Apache. It means exile, hardship, and perhaps death." White Dove squeezed his hand. "Then we face it together," she said. "I have chosen my path." As the blood-red moon rose over the smoking ruins of their home, the survivors melted into the night, carrying their dead in a fragile, desperate hope. Ahead lay the harsh wilderness, and behind them, an enemy that would never stop hunting them. The flight south was a waking nightmare. They moved by night, ghosts in a hostile land, carrying their wounded on makeshift travois. By day they hid in caves, their bellies aching with hunger, their hearts heavy with grief. Stormcrow had taken a bullet in the shoulder. He'd hidden the wound, not wanting to slow them down, but Clara saw the blood seeping through his shirt. Fever soon took him. He thrashed in a delirium, calling out for his sister, Little Dove, fighting battles in his mind. Clara refused to let him die. She used the skills Singing River had taught her, brewing willow bark tea for his fever, making poultices for the infected wound. For 3 days and nights she did not leave his side. In a moment of clarity, he gripped her hand, his eyes burning with intensity. "White Dove," he whispered, "my marriage vow. I would not force you. You must choose. Freely." "Rest," she said, tears blurring her vision. "We will talk when you are well." "Promise me," he insisted, his grip surprisingly strong. "If I die, you go back. Find safety." "You are not going to die," she said fiercely, "and I am never going back. My place is here." On the third night his fever broke. When he woke, his eyes were clear. "You stayed," he said. "Where else would I go?" She replied softly, "I am White Dove, daughter of the people." A warmth that had nothing to do with fever spread across his face. "Yes," he said, "you are." But their moment of peace was shattered when the scouts returned. "Soldiers!" one gasped, nearly falling from his horse. "A full company, 2 days behind us. They follow our trail like wolves." Despair settled over the small band of survivors. They were in no condition to fight or run. Some of the warriors spoke of making a final stand, but Clara had another idea. A desperate, terrible idea. "Let me go to them," she said to Standing Bear. "I will tell them I escaped. I will lead them away from you, give you time to reach Mexico." "No," Stormcrow said, struggling to his feet. "I did not save you from one cage to let you walk willingly into another. And I will not let any more people die for me," she shot back. It was Standing Bear who found the middle ground, a plan that required the greatest sacrifice of all. "The band will split," he said. "The wounded and the children will continue south. A small group of warriors will lead the soldiers on a false trail, a chase through the Badlands to buy the others time." "I will lead this group," Standing Bear declared. "As will I," Stormer protested. "I can ride well enough to protect what is mine," he replied, his gaze locking with hers. In the end, 10 chose to stay. 8 warriors, Stormcrow and Clara. They took the best horses and what little ammunition they had left. The parting was a blur of tears and desperate hugs. The night before they left, Stormcrow found her by a small fire. "White Dove," he said, using her Apache name. "What does your heart tell you?" She looked at this man who had saved her, who she had saved in return. "My heart tells me that my place is with you," she said, her voice soft but certain. "As your partner, your equal, if you will have me." His calloused hand found hers. "Among my people, marriage binds the souls in this world and the next. Yes, White Dove, I will have you as my wife, when we survive what is to come." They sealed their vow not with a ceremony, but with a quiet kiss under a sky full of stars. At dawn they rode north, deliberately leaving a clear trail for the army to follow. They were the bait in a deadly trap. "Ready, wife?" Stormcrow asked, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "Ready, husband," Clara replied. For 5 days they led the soldiers on a grueling chase. They used the land as a weapon, triggering rock slides, leading them into waterless canyons. But the army was relentless, and the small band of warriors was whittled down, one by one. On the 6th day, they were cornered. A second group of riders appeared from the east, cutting off their escape. It was Harlan Blackwood and his hired guns, and with them, a man wearing the badge of a U.S. Marshal. They were trapped. "We make our stand here," Standing Bear said, his voice grim. "We die as warriors." But Clara saw a flash of white, a flag of truce. "Wait," she said. "They want to talk." "It's a trick," Stormcrow snarled. "Maybe," she said, "but it's the only chance we have." She and Stormcrow rode out to meet them. Blackwood looked haggard, his face thin with obsession. The marshal, a man named Bradley, was calm and professional. "Miss Bennett," the marshal said, "I'm here to ensure your safe return. Your father is worried sick." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. "My father? He's alive?" Blackwood smiled, a cruel, triumphant smirk. "The doctor from Tucson arrived just after you left. I paid for his treatment, as promised. Your father is alive and well, Clara, and he wants his daughter home." It was a masterstroke, a weapon she could not fight. "What are your terms?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Simple," Blackwood said. "You come with us. The rest of these savages go free. I'll call off the army." "I am not yours," Clara said. "The law says otherwise," Marshal Bradley interjected. "Your father signed a marriage contract. It's legally binding." "What guarantee do we have that you will let my people go?" Stormcrow asked, his hand never leaving his weapon. "You have my word as a federal marshal," Bradley said. "If Miss Bennett comes willingly, I will personally escort the Apache to the border." It was an impossible choice. Her freedom or their lives. "I need to speak with my husband," she said, looking the marshal dead in the eye. Blackwood's face contorted in a mask of fury. "You're what?" "Stormcrow is my husband by Apache law," Clara stated calmly. "We were married 6 nights ago." "That's barbaric nonsense," Blackwood raged. "Ma'am," the marshal said, his eyes sharp, "did you enter into this union of your own free will?" "I did," Clara said. "I am not a captive. I am Apache." Blackwood lunged for his gun, but Stormcrow was faster, moving to shield her. In an instant, the marshal had his own weapon drawn, pointed at Blackwood. "Stand down, Mr. Blackwood," Bradley ordered. "This changes things. We're going back to Cedar Ridge. There will be a hearing before Judge Thompson. If the court recognizes your marriage, Mrs. White Dove, then the contract is void. If not, she belongs to me," Blackwood snarled. "Clara, no," Stormcrow said in Apache. "They will never let you go." "It's the only way to save our people," she replied in the same tongue. She turned back to the marshal. "I accept your terms, on one condition. My husband comes with me. He is to be given safe conduct, no matter the outcome." Marshal Bradley looked from her determined face to Stormcrow's deadly glare, and nodded. "Agreed." The parting from Standing Bear and the few remaining warriors was swift and heartbreaking. "You carry our hope, daughter," the old chief said, placing a hand on her head. As they rode towards Cedar Ridge, a town she thought she'd never see again, Clara felt Stormcrow's hand briefly clasp hers. A silent promise. Whatever the white man's law decided, their own vows were unbreakable. She was riding back into the cage, but this time she was not the frightened girl who had fled in the night. She was White Dove, a warrior, a wife, and she was ready for a fight. The return to Cedar Ridge was a public spectacle. The entire town lined Main Street, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and condemnation. Clara ignored their whispers, their stares. She kept her eyes fixed on the courthouse. Her father was there, looking frail but alive. His eyes filled with tears as he saw her. "Clara," he whispered, "what have they done to you?" "They saved me, Papa," she said softly. The hearing was a farce from the start. Blackwood sat with his lawyer, looking smug and confident. Stormcrow was forced to sit in the gallery, a deputy watching his every move. "Apache law holds no weight in this courtroom," Blackwood's lawyer, Mr. Peaton, declared. "We have a legally binding contract." "A contract signed under duress," Clara countered, "while my father was dying. Can you prove this marriage took place?" Judge Thompson asked, his tone skeptical. "Do you have witnesses?" Clara's heart sank. Her witnesses were miles away, fleeing for their lives. "They are dead or gone," she admitted. "How convenient," Peaton sneered. Stormcrow stood. "I will speak," he said, his voice commanding silence in the crowded room. He walked forward, his dignity a shield against their hatred. "Your laws speak of ownership. Our laws speak of the heart. White Dove chose me freely. Our vows were witnessed by the spirits and the stars. That is more binding than any piece of paper." "Touching," Peaton drawled, "but legally irrelevant." "Is it?" A new voice cut through the room. A man stood in the doorway, dressed in the simple brown robes of a priest. He held a leather-bound book. "Father Santiago," the judge said, surprised. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Honor," the priest said, approaching the bench. "But I believe I have some relevant information. 3 days ago, a young Apache couple came to my mission at San Miguel. They wished to have their union, already sealed by the laws of their own people, blessed by God. I performed a Christian wedding ceremony, properly witnessed and properly recorded." He opened the book, showing the entry in elegant script. Stormcrow and Clara White Dove Bennett united in holy matrimony. The courtroom erupted. Blackwood leaped to his feet, his face purple with rage. This is a fraud, a conspiracy. It is perfectly legal, Father Santiago said calmly. The young woman was most clear about her consent. Judge Thompson stared at the register, then at Clara. The law, as much as he clearly disliked it, was the law. A valid marriage, he said slowly, supersedes a prior marriage contract. I find this union to be legal. The contract with Mr. Blackwood is hereby void. No! Blackwood roared and he lunged, not at Stormcrow but at Clara. Stormcrow moved like lightning, intercepting him. The two men crashed over a table. The courtroom exploded into chaos. When the deputies finally hauled Blackwood off Stormcrow, the rancher's eyes were wild with hatred. This isn't over, he screamed at Clara. You think you can humiliate me? I'll see you both dead. That's a threat, Marshal Bradley said grimly. Mr. Blackwood, you're under arrest. As they dragged him away, the marshal turned to Clara and Stormcrow. You might want to leave town, soon. He's got friends and money. Outside, Clara finally reconciled with her father. Your mother would be proud, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You found your own path. They left that evening, riding south under a canopy of stars. Any regrets? Stormcrow asked, his arm around her waist. None, Clara said. But where do we belong now? Your people are in Mexico. My people will never accept us. Then we will create our own place, he said. A bridge between worlds. They rode in a comfortable silence, two spirits on a single path. Clara Bennett was gone, dead and buried in the desert night. White Dove had been born in fire and blood. Now a new woman rode towards a new life, a woman who belonged not to one world or the other, but only to herself, and to the man who rode beside her. As they crested a ridge, Stormcrow began to sing a soft traveling song. Clara joined in, her voice blending with his, the melody rising to the stars, a promise of a future they would build together. But as the last notes faded into the vast desert silence, they both heard it, the distant sound of hoofbeats, fast, coming from the direction of Cedar Ridge. Blackwood was in jail, but the marshal was right. He had friends and money. The escape wasn't over. It had just begun. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed the journey of Clara and Stormcrow, please hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot more tales from the wild and untamed frontier coming your way. And let me know in the comments below, what do you think they should do next? Turn and fight or ride for the border? I read every comment and can't wait to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay safe and keep your powder dry.